Dominique.
Bonjour.
I will introduce yourself in a second, but just to let you know, you have translation here. If you want French, it's channel 1, English channel 2, Spanish channel 3.
Sorry. Les
English is
micros
1
marchent?
and French is 2.
Le micro, ah oui, il marche.
Voilà, tout marche.
Bonjour,
Alors.
bonjour, bonjour. Merci d'être là.
Thank you for being here.
Alors, pour vous présenter tout simplement,
I'd like
I'm gonna
to introduce
at the table. To my
everyone.
left, Edgar Ramirez. To his left, Adriana Paz. Zoe Saldaña. On va repartir à l'autre bout de la
Now
table
we'll go
avec
to
le
the far
chorégraphe
end of
Damien
the
Jallet.
table with the choreographer, Damien Jallet,
Les compositeurs
The
Camille
composer.
et Clément Ducol.
posers, Camille and Clément Ducol,
Selena Gomez.
Selena Gomez,
Karla Sofía Gascón.
Karla Sofía Gascón,
Et monsieur le réalisateur
and
Jacques
the
Audiard.
director Jacques Audiard.
Jacques, si vous voulez bien, on va commencer
Jacques,
par vous.
We'll
Une
start
question
with you.
très, très simple
I
pour
have a very,
commencer,
very
parce que,
simple
quand
question
j'ai vu
to
le film,
start with.
j'ai trouvé que
When I
c'était
saw
un
the
des projets de
film,
cinéma
I
les plus
thought
beaux
it
que j'ai
was
jamais
one
vus
of
sur
the
un écran.
craziest
Ce
films
que
I'd
je me
seen on
demande,
a
c'est
screen.
comment on a cette idée-là.
How did this idea
La
occur
genèse
to
du projet,
you?
quoi, tout simplement.
How did this film come into being?
Ça m'est venu. Le premier confinement a servi à quelque chose.
The first
Vive le
lockdown
Covid.
did really serve
Et
a purpose.
J'ai lu un roman.
I read a
Boris
novel
Razan qui
by
s'appelait
Boris
Les Couilles
Razan
dedans.
called
Il y avait un
Les Couilles
chapitre
dedans,
qui
and there was a
parlait d'un
chapter that
personnage
talked about
qui
a
voulait changer
narco-trafficker who wanted to change identity.
C'était pas développé dans le roman. alors
This
que
was
finalement,
not
moi,
much
j'ai-
developed in the novel, so I just
c'est
developed
devenu
that
d'abord
idea
sous
in
forme
my film.
d'opéra. Je pensais que c'était un
It
opéra.
occurred to me
Et
as a kind of
ça a
an
mis du temps à
opera,
devenir un film.
and it took time to turn into a
Et une
film.
question pour, that's a
We
question
have a
for everybody
question
at the table
for
here.
every-
I'm just curious how to get in the state of mind to be ready for such a project. I mean, you have. I mean, it's a crazy project. How to get ready for that? To get in the state of mind for that? Let's start with you. Well, let's start with you, Karla.
Thank you very much for we are here for us. Merci beaucoup. Enchanté. Ok, voy a hablar español que se me da mejor. Pues para entrar en una película como la de
Well,
Jacques,
to get into
creo que
this kind of a
hay que estar
film
como
by
Jacques.
Jacques, you have to be
Está
like Jacques,
un poco para allá.
who's a bit mad,
No, está un poquito
He's,
pues como los demás que estamos aquí.
a bit crazy, like
Es un
we
equipo
all are here.
de gente que somos
We're a team
creadores
of
todos.
people who are
Creo
all
que
very creative.
el común de
I
nuestro
believe that
denominador es
what we have in common, our common denominator, is love for what we do, love for this film in particular and the work we did together. It's quite spectacular being here. In my specific case, I also think I'm a bit crazy too. What was most difficult for me in this film was not getting into the film, but getting out of it. It's so magnificent. I found it very difficult to get out of the character of Emilia Perez. It's a wonderful story. And I now refer to my dear Jacques and thank him so much.
The other actors, they want to answer?
What was the question again?
How to get into the state of mind to be ready for this kind of a project?
For me, it was just surrender to all the work that we needed to do. There was choreography, there was music, in addition to the characters that Jacques had created for us. So it was just, every day it was a brand new day to absorb everything that they were throwing at us, and because I just felt like the more I surrounded myself with the world of Emilia Perez, the more I was going to be able to understand as Rita what it was that she was going to be asked to give up in order for her to obtain what she wanted, So it was just a lot of surrender.
Au niveau de la création
In
musicale
terms
de la danse,
of the musical creation, the dance, the choreography,
c'est très très nouveau ce qu'on voit dans le film.
it's very new what we see in the film. It's truly something very novel, what we listen to and what we see. Were you aware of this? Is that what Jacques asked you to do?
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everybody.
Nouveau, en fait, c'est un processus qui est
New?
toujours nouveau. Les comédies musicales, c'est
Musicals are always being invented. They're always new. There are lots of technical means at our disposal which enable us to make the music more of a part of the narrative. It is much more fluid in terms of what is acted and what is sung. So in that sense, these are always very new processes. That's what makes it so interesting for us as musicians. We're not just adding music on top of an image, we're between the two. In fact, when I met Jacques, I was just coming back from Mexico. The project struck me as amazing. When he gave me the script, I said, well, why do you want I realized why he wanted a choreographer, but it didn't appear clear in the script. The characters also had to dance, and I thought, oh my goodness, they'll end up with a choreographer who will be like an obstacle between them and acting. So it was a very long process for me. It took time to understand how I would go about my work. It took a lot of discussions, trials, tests. It's a bit like when you go to a place and you realize you can't go in that direction and have to go back and try something different. It was a lengthy piece of work. It lasted about 2 years to try to understand the codes. Of course, I realized he didn't want us to use the official codes of musicals, but we needed to find a language that really worked for this story and something that all the actors could espouse as something that really belonged to them. Dance wouldn't just be an add-on, but something that really is part and parcel of the performance and that moves the tale forward. It wouldn't be something just decorative, something that would take a second place. Okay, we'll take the questions now. Third row. Thank you. Good morning. I'll take the opportunity to speak Spanish. Thank you, and my very best luck for this film, which I think is a real gift. I'd like to put a question to Karla Sofía. What, for you, was the meaning of this voyage? The voyage with this character, through the character, you were able to do a lot of things. It was a wonderful opportunity given to you by Jacques. I come from the National Radio of Spain. Well, it was difficult to start with because I didn't want to play the part of Manitas. I only wanted to play the part of Emilia. It took several months for me to convince myself that I could do both. We had to work on the character a lot, test things out. And what is absolutely beautiful in this film is that there was a sort of an internal casting for Manita. We weren't sure that at the outset we had made the right choices, and it was wonderful to discover these two characters, which I ended up playing. We had to see how they would be separate people and then come together. And for me, it was a real gift from Jacques. It was wonderful to work with all these actors and to be a person in the film like that. I didn't want to give up on this opportunity. I threw myself into the character. I threw myself into the character at a huge depth because it took quite a lot of effort on my part to start with. It was fascinating to work on this character. Some characters I feel I couldn't do. At one point, we didn't know who would be playing the two characters, and then it became quite obvious that it would be me. The truth of the matter was that it was a wonderful experience. It's one of the I was one of the first people to be in the casting with Jacques, and I saw this whole process. He's a wonderful person to work with. We're extremely fortunate. For me, he's the best director in the world. He lets us create. He leaves us free to create, to feel things, sense things. And participating in this creative project for me was absolutely incredible. When I was given the script, I thought, what on earth is this? It's totally mad. It's a musical in Spanish, and he doesn't speak Spanish, moreover. I thought, how are we going to understand each other if I don't know how to speak English or he can't speak Spanish? Well, I don't want to use the word trans, but anyway, this is the same question that Joaquin Phoenix put to me in Sisters and Brothers. I can't remember what the name is exactly in English. And I said, well, we'll understand each other through telepathy. And Jacques and I, we didn't even need to talk to each other because we knew exactly what each of us was thinking. Thank you. We can't use telepathy for the questions, so please use one of the official languages. Florencia Angeles, Mexico. I would like to ask the director, well, first of all, thank you for your film. It made me cry, laugh, gave me a lot of emotions. I'd like to ask you in particular, as a director, and put the question to Selena, Karla, and others. What was the change of perception like Mexico before this film and afterwards in terms of the violence we see on the screen? Is the question for me or for the actors? For you, first of all, and then for the actors. In fact, I was asked how this project came about. I said, yes, it's an opera, but why in Mexico? And why in Spanish? Something shocks me deeply in Mexico. It's all these problems, people, missing people, feminicides. There are whole regions where you can't go because they're unsafe. And the crumbling of democracy is unbearable for me. I wanted to make a musical. I wanted people to sing and dance. So why not against the background of a tragedy?
Les comédiennes, peut-être?
Yeah.
Para responderle, se lo puedo responder también en español.
I'll be answering in Spanish too.
Siendo de los Estados Unidos, siendo de raíces latinas, y ahora tengo ya más de casi 20 años que vivo en Los Ángeles.
I've been living in Los Angeles for about 20 years. Mexican culture is something that's dear to my heart. I have lots of family still there. There's a lot of injustice, there's a lot of corruption, but I believe that's true of all countries in the world. And I still have this great respect and admiration for Mexican culture. I'm very grateful to Jacques because he used a lot of creative liberty and freedom. He has this story which depicts a number of things that you can find in Mexico and which need to be improved, like in other countries, but he celebrates the culture, which is so beautiful and so rich and so artistic.
Selena?
Selena?
I forgot the question. I'm sorry.
How is your perception of Mexico and the situation in Mexico has changed in the movie?
I mean, I echo a little bit of what Zoe was saying. I still have family there, and obviously, me growing up in Texas was another part of my life. But I think, in general, it was wonderful, and I think they said it perfectly. I don't think I could add anything better.
Adriana?
Yo lo único que puedo... perdona, Adriana.
No.
Discúlpame.
No, tú.
No.
Bueno, yo como mexicana, la verdad
Well, as a Mexican,
fue doloroso.
it
verlo.
was
Es
painful,
doloroso porque además
and it
vivo en
is
México.
painful because, moreover, I
vivo
live
todos
in
los días
Mexico,
con el-
and
con el
every
miedo,
day
¿no?
I
Ahí no puedes
live
vivir con
with
miedo todo el
fear.
tiempo, es decir, de no poder salir de tu casa.
You
Pero
can't
sí
go
sabes,
out of
¿no?
your
que hay un
house at night
peligro
alone,
latente y que hay
but
que ser
you know
cuidadosos
there's this
con el
underlying
hijo y
danger, and you
además
have to be
siempre
very
es como
careful in terms of your children as
entrenarlo
well.
para que esté
You have to
preparado para
teach
eso.
people, you have to prepare them for
Pero
this.
lo que decía Zoe, es que
But
es
as said,
una gama tan grande, también es un
there's
país tan
such a
hermoso,
huge
con
range of
tantas
things in
cosas a
Mexico. It's
nivel
such a beautiful
cultural, de
country with
paisajes
so much in
y
terms of
tanta gente
culture,
valiosa.
landscapes, and
Y
so
lo que
many
hiciste,
wonderful
Jacques,
people.
o
And this
sea,
is what
poder
Jacques
la
shows
maestría con la
with
que
great mastery.
mezcló
He mixes together the music and dancing, but it is a musical, granted, but you can sense the pain as the inner fiber and passion, and you can fully understand this situation in the film. But it's such an artistic world. I felt that was quite outstanding. He's quite a genius, Jacques. Truly, it was an honor to be able to be part of all this. You have this painful side to things, but it's depicted in such a marvelous way. For me, I'd like to say that I've lived in Mexico. I have thousands of friends there. They are wonderful people, as Teresa has just said, and she is one of these wonderful people. You have millions and millions of people who are wonderful, but you have just a few bad people. What is most important in this film is that it sends a message of hope to Mexico. We can also change and become better, and I think that's what is most important, not only for Mexico, but for all people who watch the film. Even if things are bad, we can always change them, and I think that's what counts most.
Okay, je parle en español aussi. Yo creo que hay una idea
I think there's an idea that's been taken up by the press and in our various interviews yesterday, and that's been going around my head. And last week I was in Mexico. I go there very often. I spend time there. And I don't know who coined the idea, but you have this idea of exile within yourself, in a country, in a world that you no longer recognize. And when I saw the film last night, because I'd never actually seen it before, I saw the screening last night, and I could see this concept being repeated. The world you know sort of disappears and then comes back, and you have a sense of exile. And I think this is very widespread in Latin America. We don't recognize any longer the country in which we live, but we can't leave it. It's a reality. Mexico is typical of Latin America. There is a lot of violence in Mexico, and in the character, she doesn't even recognize her body. She feels like an exile within her own body. And this is something that's an inner reality, and it's depicted in the character, and it's also expressed in this world, which appears on the screen. You get the impression no one can escape, but some people do manage to do so. And Karla has talked about this message of hope, and that's what we need, we Latin Americans. It doesn't matter how many blows there are, how much blood, how many wars. There's this ability to celebrate and to create, as though hope was just over the horizon there. Hope is there, and it guides us towards a destiny. It enables us to keep going forward. And I believe that this is what you see in the film. You bear with things, but there's this great ability to look ahead. That's very Latin American. Of course, you have this great compassion, this way of looking at things. The idea was to explore all the ideas in the film and to turn them into a film.
Par ici, s'il vous plaît. Question over there.
Bonjour, Alicia Garcia de l'Agence F. Félicitations, Monsieur Audiard.
Congratulations, Mr. Audiard. This was a huge surprise, this film. It's quite magnificent. I have a question to Karla. I wanted to ask you, first of all, we don't really know you very well. Sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying because I was listening to the translation. Where do you live? Where have you been? Was this role important for you as a trans person? Well, I was in Mexico when I was called for the first time about this film, and someone said, "Hi, we have about 40 lines to learn for tomorrow, songs," and the first thing I said was, "I don't know how to sing." This is, and I thought to myself, well, goodness me, how can I get involved in this? But thanks to Camille and Clément and the team who contacted me in Mexico and all the people here who we worked with, well, we worked on this for 2 or 3 years. We worked on the songs, and I managed to learn all this. But I was there, and I was really taken by surprise. What does this character represent for me? Not so much a trans person. What I want to say is that I'd like to send out a message for all actors. We are many actors, and this has been our job for most of our lives. I have lots of friends, both male and female, who work in very small theaters, who earn little money, but they're fighting every day to get a part. They go to castings and so on. And I think it's a very beautiful thing. The idea is that you should never give up. In the end, at the age of 52, here I am. And this is one of the things that I would like to underscore. As to trans people, the message is very obvious. It's a terrible predicament to be. People use the word trans, but people who are trans, they are often the object of insults or death threats simply because they exist, because of what they are. In Mexico, we use very harsh phrases when addressing trans people often. People can be very gross. It's a real issue. I think that trans people should be treated like just anybody else. I'm no better, no worse than somebody else. And I think we should be taken for what we are. We have to continue fighting for our rights. We have to continue with our lives, and we have our body. We're allowed to change it because we want to. We can make decisions about our own body. I wanted to be a trans woman. If someone isn't happy in his or her body, well, why not change it? And nobody else should tell us what to do. What I think is very important in this character and in the film made by Jacques is the following. It's quite clear that trans people, we trans people, are just people. Before we're trans people, we're people. It's not as though we were a sort of a stain on the world. We are as human as others, and we have existed since the beginning of the world. We shouldn't feel guilty for what happens in the world. Women were deemed to be guilty when they started working, and then colored people were deemed to be at fault. And then we had LGBT people who were criticized. And the new fashion is, for example, people who are different from others. I believe that what should be made very clear is that we're just normal people. If you are trans, that's the way you are. And I say this very sincerely and out loud. I think a trans person is a person who is transitioning. And once the person turns into what he or she wants to be, that person ceases to be trans and is just a he or she as he or she wants. It's like being a baby who is born and you come into your own. So I think that in the world we should be treated with respect. We should have the same opportunities as everyone else. And I think the message is quite clear in the film. It's a very important message. Through the family, through women, many things can change. The violence in this world is largely due to men. And I think it's wonderful to have this woman in the film who's just a human being. And we should talk about that person, not as trans, but just as the person she is.
Bonjour. Bonjour, Elie Mastorou pour FrenchMania.fr. Je vais parler en français.
I'll be speaking French. I have a question for Mr. Audiard, but above all, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for this film to you all. Mr. Audiard, thank you for this film, which is a collective piece of art. And this is a feeling we often experience when looking at your films like Deepan and others. Do you have the impression that this is a sort of a collective film which talks about the world in a different manner? Could you sum up your question, perhaps? Put your question so that I can answer yes or no, perhaps. Do you also sense that this film is a collective piece of work? Yes, absolutely. I make films so I'm not alone. That's how things come about. I usually work with a co-writer, and then we have a team, and the actors and actresses. Yes, of course. It can only be a collective piece of work. The sum of the angles is greater than the triangle. When we're all together, the ideas are exchanged and take form. That's how I view matters. If I make films, it's to meet people and to be with people. Otherwise, I'd be very solitary. I'd be a misanthropist.
Buenos días, felicidades
Good
a todo
morning
el
and
equipo.
congratulations to the whole team. This is a question for Mr. Audiard. I was deeply moved by your film because I believed that you have reflected the great pain in our country through the music. How did you manage to get so close to this reality? What were your sources? What were your inquiries, investigations? Because this film feels deeply, deeply Mexican. We don't sense that it's foreign in any way. Well, for me, it's not a kind of a documentary. You have many documentaries which are much better documented. I read a lot of Mexican literature, I've listened to Mexican music, I've watched a lot of Mexican films, but I think it's really the result of imagination and the way I feel things, I sense them. I have a very poetical relationship with Mexico. It's exactly what my friends were saying earlier on. There's something schizophrenic in Mexico, which is very attractive.
The gentleman with the red shirt over there.
Hi, Jacques. Thank you. As I'm coming from Yediot Ahronot in Tel Aviv. As a former drag queen and genderqueer, I really appreciate your film, and I hope you will win. The obvious question, why did you choose the doctor will be Israeli, and how did you find Mark Ivanir?
suis embarrassé parce que je crois que j'ai pas de
I'm a bit
réponse.
embarrassed because I don't have an answer to your question.
Je me demande si...
Maybe.
Écoutez, je botte pas du tout en touche, mais je crois que c'était dans le... Vous savez, je parlais du chapitre du
You know, I was talking about the chapter in a book, and I think that the doctor in the book was Israeli. I just took the character from the book,
Je suis sûr de rien.
but I'm not sure of that.
Sorry. Je comprends pas.
Ouais, vous trouvez le personnage, l'acteur?
À Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles.
Ok, madame.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Hello.
Buenos días.
Good
Soy
morning.
Cristina Ibáñez de Sensacine, México.
Question from Mexico. I'll ask the question in English.
I'm going to read my question because between Spanish and English, my head is mixed. So, Selena, there are many iconic erotic dialogues that have made history in cinema. But would you say that your character's line is going to make history as one of the sexiest dialogue in Spanish ever heard?
I don't know if I'm sexy enough for that, but I don't know how to answer that.
A mí sí me parece que eres sexy.
Well, I'll have.
Oui.
I don't know how to answer that. I'm sorry. Like, what do you mean? Because I say a bad word in the movie?
No. It was.
I mean, well, that's the writing. That's definitely not me. I think it was genuinely a very powerful moment in the movie, and it's very poetic.
Unfortunately, this is all the time we have. Mesdames et messieurs, merci beaucoup. Merci infiniment.
Thank you very much.
She's like, you're like, what's it?
¿Pero por qué?